Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back from our break. I hope you had a good lunch. We have the people from our previous panel back here. So we have Marcel Unterberg from the municipality of Helmond. Hi. Then we have Fotis Gogolos from Lamia, Greece. And then we have Trond Hansen, municipality of Gjesdal. Johan Peter from the ministry at Estonia. Then Carlos Abreu from Porto, Public Transport Society. And also Renske Martin Sahatike, now as panelist. To thank you to all of you, and to start off our session on regulatory aspects of autonomous shuttles, I will lay the framework in a few words. So last October, the 27 member states reached some common conclusions as part of the high-level discussion on connected and automated driving. And the focus should be going forward on human centricity and enhanced data sharing. But today, the aspect we're looking at is how to go along the regulatory framework and how we can fit the things that we're doing around Europe and get things done. So first, there's a need for a kind of holistic and cross-sectoral point of view on regulation, and also the member states recognized the need to move a bit towards more enabling risk-based and performance-based regulation. One key point was also to focus the importance of the work done at the United Nations UNECE Commission on technical requirements and also on the traffic regulations, because this is something that countries then implement in their own national legislation. And also synchronizing activities between member states. And one tool in this has been the CCAM platform, so Connected Automated Mobility Platform, and the works that have been done by experts from member states. And maybe the availability of more uniform information from the testing, what are the results, what are the issues encountered, how to move forward, was also stated as one key point. On testing issues, when you talk about automated vehicle testing, you need to be able to use the vehicle in traffic. So it needs to be somehow taken into traffic. And if it's not type approved or doesn't fulfill all the standard technical requirements, as is the case with many of the shuttles, then aiming for at least equal level of safety, but then in different countries you have different ways of evaluating this, and then you can also run into some quite practical issues if you can enter information on the vehicle in the vehicle register, for example. Then another topic that has been discussed quite a lot also at the European Commission forums, the CCAM platform, is the kind of what the information should be reported from the testing, to kind of have a more uniform picture of what are the issues and what kind of things need development also on the regulatory and technical requirements side. In addition to the vehicle approval issues, then, and this is kind of very relevant here in our FABULOS case, when you try to move towards commercial operations from not-for-profit operations, testing operations, you can run into some issues depending on what type of vehicle you're using and in which country you're operating. So the issue of making sure that also commercial transport operations are kind of normal, and you can do those also with automated shuttles and different types of vehicles. That's very important going forward. And there are a lot of issues there that are not yet clear. And I think many of the issues have also been raised by the FABULOS project and the pilots. But, from a kind of regulatory authority point of view, it's quite clear that we need to have a lot of flexibility in the thinking. Also, when we look at what kind of testing can be done, how to best enable the tests in the current situation, so we can gain valuable experiences from the tests, and then kind of learn and develop regulations also in an agile manner. And a lot of uncertainty involved as well. I think that was the starting words from me. So I think next we move to the people who've been busy with the topic in the pilots here. And I think we will actually continue a bit from the discussion you had in the previous session. So you touched a little bit on issues you encountered with respect to regulations, requirements. And I'll kick off the discussion, but I'll also remind the viewers that please, if you have any questions, you can type the questions and we'll get back to them at the end of the session. All right, so I think the first topic to discuss is kind of going right to the point. So what kind of regulatory obstacles or kind of things that weren't clear did you face during the project in your respective cities? And what do you think is maybe the kind of most urgent thing that needs some kind of addressing? Maybe Marcel, would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you. Well, let me start by saying that the collaboration with all the involved partners and parties was great. So that's very good. But it doesn't mean it wasn't a difficult and extensive procedure, and it took also a long time, of course, at the end. And there are several reasons for that. It's maybe a bit difficult to summarize that briefly, but I shall try to name the most important ones. First of all, indeed, you need an approved vehicle. And I believe the Dutch Vehicle Authority has already a lot of experience and expertise. And maybe with that background, they are now more demanding than before, and maybe also compared with other countries. The second one is when you have an approved vehicle, then you have to go through an extensive procedure to see if that vehicle is safe to drive on the intended route. And then the Vehicle Authority invites also other organizations that have expertise with infrastructure, organizations that have expertise with human factors, and they will assess the start document from the applicant. And well, based on their assessment, you have to cover all the risks and come with good mitigation measures. So that's a second thing that is very extensive and costs time. A third one was also, especially in the beginning, some capacity issues, and also that more people or more organizations are involved makes it a bit less flexible, the total procedure sometimes. And a fourth one I want to mention is maybe also good. 3 years ago, there was also a serious, very bad accident in the Netherlands. Also with an innovative vehicle. It was the Stint, some sort of a bike which can carry 6 to 8 children. And 4 children died in that accident. That was very sad, and maybe that also have a role that it's even more safer now these days than before that. So yeah, well, that I think that are the most 4 important reasons why it is such a long procedure. Also.
Yeah, thanks. And it's safety first, so that is important. And yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, Trond, how did it go in Norway? What kind of regulatory obstacles did you have, if any?
Well, the process in Norway was much easier than in the Netherlands. Only 6 weeks until we had the approval. But as we touched in the last session, the vehicles in the second pilot, the Toyota Proaces, they were not type-proofed in Norway, so they had to go 250 hours per vehicle empty on the route to get the approval to take passengers. So, of course, this is first and foremost a technological project, but it was a little disappointing surprise when we discovered that we had to go 85% of the pilots without passengers. Even though COVID-19 restrictions, we could have had some passengers. But now we are on the way to reach 500 hours for both vehicles in total. So I think Monday next week we can have passengers. But that was definitely the largest obstacle in our process.
Yeah, thanks, Trond. And sounds good that you're starting to able to take on passengers. Okay, Carlos, obstacles in Portugal?
Yes, as we speak in the morning session, in Portugal we have no legislation yet in place for the AV testing on open roads. That's because that's why we couldn't have the pilot. But I can say we have 2 years ago created by government an interministerial working group with one mission of studying the legislative changes necessary to introduction of new technologies related to autonomous vehicles. One of the main tasks of this working group is to present a proposal for the regulation of testing and the respective safety conditions. This regulation for obtaining licenses to carry out AV tests that Portugal is developing has been a long and complex process because on one hand it is a completely innovative process, and because it is intended to lead to regulations that are not too restrictive and but also not too vague and general. The achieving of the right balance between the regulation with high detail or more rigid, or the possibility of having several updates in short or medium term in a concept of learning by doing has been an obstacle that is difficult to overcome. The task of the working group is practically completed, and the regulatory proposal to perform EV tests in Portugal will soon be approved by our government. So we think in a brief time, having more news about this new law about doing tests with AV vehicles.
Yeah, So Portugal also on the verge of having an updated. Thanks. Sounds good. All right. Then Fotis, what were your experiences obstacle-wise?
Clearly in our case, the biggest obstacle was the lack of a clear and streamlined procedure regarding the licensing of the vehicles. The legislative and the regulative framework was there, allowing vehicles to circulate in open roads. However, it was formulated back in 2015. It was outdated at times, and it was somehow, customized to facilitate the first pilot, lacking the broader image. As such, they didn't produce any clear guidelines for the applicants, for us or the suppliers. We had to, as I told earlier, we had to navigate different procedures and different documents, but there were times that we reached the dead end and had to start all over again. However, it all went well. But my main lesson learned, I would say, my main suggestion to respective stakeholders would be that in such environments, it's really crucial and important to get everyone on the same table early on and build a thorough work plan, including requirements, roles, responsibilities for everyone involved, for all local and regional stakeholders, primarily, of course, the suppliers, the city owners, the city planners, and the citizens and the road authorities, in order for everyone involved to be always on the same page. Even in our case, that we started, unofficial discussions a couple of months before the application, the first application. We still had some surprises down the way, so it is important to have a thorough work plan. To name a few, it was a surprise that eventually a type approval process was still required, even though the vehicles were already type approved in an EU country. And also the fact that regardless of the vehicle size, the professional driver's license was still required. So those things were, surprises that we had to deal with ad hoc. But yeah, my main conclusion would be that you need to bring everyone on the same table early on.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very valuable lesson and kind of repeated in many cases. Let's go to Estonia and Johan. Johan, how did you have any major obstacles?
Well, not major obstacles. We had quite clear rules how to register vehicles for testing, but I think that the broader issue here is the EU regulation regarding the type approval. That regulation, the 2018/858, meaning that this forbids member states of registering or allowing on market such vehicles that are not type approved. Basically, this allows some innovativeness still, but it is still not meant for autonomous vehicles. So we have tried this test license plate, so to give to the autonomous vehicles, but this is still not a very clear solution. So right now we have proposed an amendment to the Traffic Act to make it a bit more clearer for the future, to not only allow the testing plates for technology tests, but also, for example, commercial use if necessary, because we have had interest from companies already, not companies working with completely autonomous vehicles, but vehicles that would be remotely driven, that they would like to begin already commercial operations, but this kind of solution that we have in place right now is not suitable for actually commercial operations. So we need to make some kind of amendments to the law to enable this actually, because we don't want to be the bottleneck, so to say, for innovation.
Yeah. That sounds very good. This was mentioned in some of your comments earlier, but kind of digging a bit more deep into the cooperation with the national authorities in each country. So what experiences do you have there, and some kind of valuable advice potentially for the future? So maybe Fotis, do you want to go first?
Our experience has been a really positive one. The pilot and the project as a whole was an excellent opportunity to start a debate on a country level regarding changes needed in the legislation, since it was quite outdated. We formed a work group with the respective ministry, the Ministry of Transport, along with the fellow city of Trikala, and we were really pressing the authorities to proceed with a legislation update. I must admit that their attitude and their focus on the matter has been really impressive. They were really cooperative at times, and they were willing to proceed with the alignment of the legislation with the current state of the art. And I must admit that despite a change in the government due to elections, we faced the same perseverance from the ministry, and luckily this effort succeeded in the law aligned with the current state of the art. Also, I would like to add that on an international level, I mean, the Mobile Consortium had its first pilot in Estonia, in Tallinn, and then in Greece, in Lamia. So that was an excellent opportunity to also test the communication channels between two different national authorities, and we established early on a communication channel with the help of the suppliers from Estonia. They were really helpful, and they responded in a timely manner when required. Especially in our case, the regional road authorities were had a justified inexperience with the issue at hand. So we asked the Estonian colleagues for some hints and insights in regards to the relative paperwork or the type approval process, and they were really helpful to assist. So all in all, I would say that on both on a national and international level, the cooperation with the national authorities was really positive.
Yeah, sounds good. And I think that's one of the big values of the FABULOS project and other projects where you do kind of try to do similar things in different places. Then you get these kind of experiences. You learn much quicker. Okay, Marcel, on the Dutch authorities and how that cooperation works.
Yeah, maybe two things. First of all, as I said before, the collaboration was very good, so that's very positive. But it doesn't mean it was a real struggle to get everything done in time to have this pilot also. So it also has to do with the different interests we have. The Dutch Vehicle Authority, we as a city and our region, the FABULOS Consortium, the vehicle manufacturer. So it also has to do with that. But at the end, because of the good collaboration, we succeed. So that's very good to see. Another thing, what is maybe worth mentioning is, of course, we want to learn from this kind of pilots. Not only we, I believe everybody wants to learn from this kind of pilots. And also in the Netherlands, we have national learn questions, and that's good that we can contribute to that. But I also think we are not testing enough. It's also a great experience as a city, as a region, but also for all the economically parties to test how these procedures work and how it is to deploy this kind of vehicles. So I also think that must be more important, more testing and get experience.
Yeah, that sounds good. Then any insights from Norway on the national authority cooperation?
Yeah, I think the cooperation has worked quite good with the NPRA, the Norwegian Public Roads Administration. They've been cooperative and answered our questions quickly, easy to find the right persons. And I also must say they have shown an interest in these kind of projects. I know they already collected some experience from other pilots in Norway, in Oslo, in Bærum, Gjøvik, Forus, even in Svalbard, and had some positive results, some child diseases, and then it's much easier to know where to have a focus in the coming pilots.
Yeah.
So overall, a very good cooperation.
Yeah, thanks, Trond. Nice to hear. And how about the Finnish pilots, Ransky?
Yeah, quite similar to what we've heard, and quite similar also to Norway in a way that also here in Finland, I mean, the process is incredibly fast, I would say, and flexible. I think even probably in Finland, it's the time it took for the companies to get the test plates and to be allowed on the road was maybe even only 3 weeks, or it was like really fast. I think it's probably one of the fastest procedures in Europe, as you know. I think also that's why we've already been having, we have had already in Helsinki, I think up to maybe 6 different pilots, which is of course back and forth. I mean, the first one was probably a bit more difficult, both for the road authority and the companies, but you get experience on both sides and the process kind of gets easier all the time. And so we kind of from the city side have not had to be involved that much. We haven't had to help the company, and that's in this sense it was of course also a company from Finland, so you all knew each other. The lines were very short, so that was definitely very easy, and it makes the planning easier. If you also know because it's nice for the companies if it's a smooth process, but it's a really nice process for the cities as well, because you know you can just the timing of the pilot is more clear, and yeah, it's I think what's maybe a good sort of takeaway also listening to what the colleague said, especially with companies piloting abroad and with cooperation between the different countries, that it's even something simple like making sure all the documents are available in English and not only in your native language. We have discovered that wasn't the case in many countries, and it's a small thing, but it could just really help to speed up the process. And I also think I know that Marsha now didn't mention it, but what companies might not know in advance is that the costs vary so much per country to go through this process. In some countries, I think also in Finland, it's the cost for the license plate and maybe a paper here and there, but you're talking about a few hundred euros maybe. And there's been big differences between the 5 countries, with the Netherlands being by far the most expensive, going even in the tens of thousands of euros. So it's really, we didn't know this in advance either. So of course the companies had to budget for their pilots, and I mean these were all these kind of surprises that were very useful for us, and I hope will also be very useful for future cities and future companies.
Yeah, I strongly feel that they will be very useful, and there are a lot of small things that only come up then when you start doing and implementing the thing in a specific city, for example. All right, I'd like to remind the viewers that you have the opportunity to ask questions to our panelists, and we'll get back to those in a few minutes at the end of the session. But next, I'd like to move to our following topic. So if we pose, if we frame it this way, what data or what information do you see as the most important to have or to produce, so that the local regulations could be kind of developed further? Johan, maybe you'd like to start.
It's a difficult question. I think there are like two aspects. One is related to regulation, and the other is related to procuring the actual services. So, in terms of regulation, I don't know whether there is problem too much about what kind of data is there or isn't there. I think that there may be adequate amount of data there for regulation. The issue might be rather that we lack still an European approach. We still have discussions on the UN level about the role and the future of automated vehicles regulations. But for municipalities or public transportation centers to actually use this kind of autonomous vehicles, I think for them the most crucial information is comparative cost-benefit numbers, highlighting what would it actually mean to the city's budget to implement and deploy such solutions. Does it compare to normal public transportation? How much people will it be able to service in comparison with regular services? So this kind of realistic numbers. Otherwise, we're still talking about pilots. But if we want to get out of the piloting cycle and into the implementing cycle, we need to have real numbers.
Yeah. Maybe could this be a part of the exemption process as well, right? Wouldn't that be the way if on a European level all the road authorities and ministries would make this a mandatory part, certain minimum levels of reporting that are useful for the cities as well? Maybe that could be. Yeah,
I think currently the focus on the requirements is still on the kind of vehicle technical aspects, but I think it would definitely be valuable to kind of evaluate what are the kind of criteria to help make better decisions on what kind of deployments or pre-deployments or larger pilots to implement. Yeah, for sure. What about Fotis on kind of what data information would be useful for kind of developing future-proofing regulations?
Well, I will have to agree with my colleague from Estonia. I mean, the local and regional regulations would be facilitated greatly by a streamlined procedure on a European level, if not even standardized. I mean, that would make a difference for the faster development of the sector, clearly, on the one hand. And on the other hand, also, I will have to agree with Johan, the results, the benefits from AV, especially in public transport systems, is not clear and tangible enough for all stakeholders involved. This means that there are still open questions that could be integrated perhaps in the exception process. For instance, in our cases, all stakeholders were curious what the next steps are, what happens after the pilot, and what an AV bus line would mean for daily transportations, the daily transportation behaviors. There were also questions about the suitability or the sustainability of the approach. So, yeah, those are types of information that would make a huge difference when we move forward.
Yeah. Marcel, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I think maybe we all agree, because also I think it's very important that there are standards for the whole of Europe, indeed. That would be very good. So that is something we have to work on. And also the other point that was mentioned, indeed, the shuttle is a technical innovation, and it can really help in our total ambition of the mobility transition. But indeed, how will it work? With what business plan, etc. So things have to change, and that's also indeed important. How can those shuttles contribute to that? So I think that is also very, very important indeed. Maybe some other thing is in general, and we are already doing that also in the Netherlands, is one central place where you can share all the experiences. When we are doing pilots in the West or in the North and the South, bring it together in one place and use it. And not only in the Netherlands, but also between all the cities. And that is also what we are doing now here in the FABULOS project. And that is really great, of course. So, that's also, I think, a very important thing.
Yeah, I agree. Doing that between cities, kind of within projects, and also between EU countries and even wider. So, kind of having, as we have the EU CAD knowledge base, where all this pilot information also is, you can provide it there, and you can see what's going on around Europe. So this is something I think we should definitely aim for even more in the future. Renske, how do you see the question on
and to disseminate it also properly?
That's
I think
important.
that also maybe this relates a bit to that and to the part of the sort of commercialization that we talked about. That once this now goes to really commercial public transport or commercial services, that then we have to more or less start from scratch, because there's entirely different laws and regulations starting applying in many countries. And I know that, for example, there's the European project called Avenue, which is kind of a sister project of FABULOS as well. They are looking into specifically that, trying to deploy kind of commercial operations and running into difficulties there as well. So, and that knowledge also feeds into the database, the EU CAD database that you mentioned. Yeah. So that's a really good place, I would say, to start from as well, if you're
kind of sharing experiences, sharing issues, learnings. That's kind of more of that, and that will definitely help also the work on developing the regulations and technical requirements. I'll go a bit into the questions from the viewers at this point. We have one to Carlos on the Portugal situation. So beyond the thing you mentioned, that the kind of legislation didn't allow for this, are there or have you identified any other roadblocks in implementing automated shuttles, and in Portugal or in particular in Porto? Carlos?
Sorry.
Yep.
It was switch off. We didn't have no big problems despite the legal framework. We had several meetings with our municipality, and they were excited with this project, and we didn't have no big issues to deal with, because we didn't go to the field to have the vehicles in the road. So other aspects, we expect to have some problems with. We choose, I think, a route with some demands, difficult demands, and some of them during the whole process the development process. We think we will have problems with some different lanes with the vehicles, with some different trajectories of the vehicle, with some crossroads, but we didn't get there.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Carlos. Then we have a question maybe on the kind of a challenge related to going into more deployments when you have the kind of safety requires currently that operating in low speeds, and then user acceptance would kind of you would need to have higher or regular kind of urban speeds available. So do you have any suggestions on future projects on the kind of for example areas that are kind of best suited, so what to take into account in kind of choosing the area? Who would like to comment on this? Fotis? Yep.
Yeah, maybe I can say something
Marcel.
about it. When I also now look at the Helmond route, for example, it has 3 different parts, to be honest. One access road with a school next to it, one cycle street, sort of a cycle path, and a distributor road, where normally higher speeds are normal. And also on that distributor road, there are no pedestrians, no cyclists, there are no... it's a straight path. So I believe on those parts where are less crossing vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists, you can try on a safe manner to reach higher speeds. And especially where there is more interaction with other traffic, there it's still very difficult, I believe. That needs time, probably.
Yeah, Andrzejewski?
Yeah, I can maybe comment, because the question also related to the user acceptance.
Yeah.
And I think we have now, so we've had 6 pilots in total, and we now have 2 of the pilots who have actually been reaching speeds 30 kilometers an hour, 28 kilometers an hour. They're at the moment in Gjesdal, they're driving properly higher speeds, kind of almost the whole route. So I think it's maybe more, especially in relation to user acceptance. It's now about getting the driver really out. I think you only get a proper user acceptance, good results or kind of credible answers when you don't ask people to kind of imagine that this vehicle where you're sitting in would not have a driver, that they would actually need to try it out fully driverless. Also, then the results maybe even with the lower speeds of 15 or 18 kilometers an hour might be different, and probably the speeds with 25, 30 as well. So I think getting the steward out of the vehicle there is really important in relation to the user acceptance, and that will be, of course, now the next step after the pilots that we have done. A next step would be to start piloting without stewards or safety drivers on board in the countries where it's allowed, and then again look at user acceptance.
Yeah, indeed, that's very important. We have one question on the liability side and on insurance issues. I think I would frame it this way: were there any what kind of interaction reception did you have regarding getting insurance for the vehicles in the pilots? If you have some point on to kind of bring up, was it easy? Did you manage to do it? Okay.
I think that none of us was really. I think it's been a task for the companies mostly. Yeah. So that's why there's not overwhelming enthusiasm to say anything about this, because it hasn't been really our role so much. Fotis. Oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, in our case, it was the only thing that we didn't got involved. Actually, we didn't get involved with.
Yeah.
Maybe you can, I don't know, you maybe know from the Finnish side as well, right? It's the companies who arrange it as a
the
regular?
kind of in Finland, it's the kind of company organization who operates the vehicle and is responsible for having insurance on it, and kind of based on the regular third-party liability insurance. So the insurance companies have options for that. So far hasn't proven to be an issue, at least brought to our attention in the Finnish trials.
And isn't it so that it's a mandatory part of at least the Finnish, but I think almost all the regulatory frameworks are European?
Yeah, having the third-party liability.
Yeah.
If you have a vehicle and it moves in traffic.
Yeah.
All right. No questions at this point. If you still have one, feel free to present it. I have maybe one point of discussion for the panel regarding traffic rules, and that's maybe looking a bit further. But in the pilots, there is no digital version of the traffic rules, and they are a thing that change and are quite different from even city to city, and there are local conventions that need to be taken into account. So I think this has come up as one issue if planning for wider deployment or kind of doing the same thing in different countries, then to have in some kind of uniform form information on the traffic rules. I think in the pilots it's all kind of manually taken into account, but I don't know if this is something that has come up in your work on the pilots, or if you have some thoughts on this, feel free to elaborate.
Johan, maybe.
Johan, from the Estonian side.
We haven't really put too much thought into it in practice. We have discussed it, and it was also discussed in the expert group's publication on self-driving vehicles in Estonia, the digitalization of traffic rules, but we haven't really had much practice with it. We have, of course, digitalized all the traffic information, which is freely accessible and could be accessed and integrated into the operational system of the self-driving vehicle. What the speed limits are, who needs to give way, and so forth. But we haven't done much more. But I think one of the crucial part is actually the predictability of the traffic environment. And we saw that this is really something that the current stage of autonomous vehicles may not be able to handle yet, meaning that we had a small accident in the route where an unpredictable maneuver was made from a human driver who drove in front of the self-driving vehicle, and even with all the sensors and all of the high-tech equipment that was meant to stop the vehicle, it isn't possible to always mitigate all the risks if the traffic around is too unpredictable. So this is one of the key elements, and the key element also is how to further develop all the sensors and the mechanisms that they could be more predictive of the unpredictable environment.
Yeah, it's very well said.
And maybe that's also because Johan just mentioned there was an incident or an accident on the route in Tallinn. I think that from the audience there was also a question that was there any incidents reported or any claim towards the insurance? Well, there you go. That was one example, and I can say that in the pilot during the pilot in Helsinki there was actually overnight a break-in one of the vehicles. Luckily, with not too much damage, and there was only some interior camera was stolen. So luckily, the thieves didn't know the real value of the lidars on the roof. But these things happen, and to be honest, I don't know exactly what company did insurance-wise, but I'm sure they were insured, and it didn't relate to another person in the traffic. But
and not a traffic-related incident,
no. But on the digitalization of the traffic rules, I might be not 100% correct, but I think that Helsinki has the plan to do this, to integrate this in the digital twin of the city. We have this 3D city model and are developing a digital twin, and exactly that kind of data would kind of feed into it. We have different projects going on at my organization and on this kind of digitalization of this kind of rules and traffic data. And so hopefully that will help the companies then at some point.
Yeah, I think definitely. Yeah. All right. I think it's time to thank our panelists. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences and your expertise, and to Rensky and to Marcel, Fotis, Trond, Johan, Carlos.